commune has been your, where we originally got in touch with you, your brilliant online business where where your goal is to reach 1 billion people and influence them in terms of wellness and meditation and whatnot. And I just wonder on your thoughts in terms of community and connection and, how that is in the world today and your basic thoughts. Like, it's a massive question, but really your thoughts on the topic of community and the need for it right now with each one of us.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember which of you mentioned the fact that we tend to sanctify the individual more than ever at this moment, and we all have a certain self. We all have personal histories, and we have a underlying nucleotide sequence that informs our DNA. So I'm not going to say that there's no self at all. But it's every spiritual and philosophical tradition really points us to cultivating a sense of non-self or connection, or kind of sense that we're part of something greater. In fact, spirituality might be just defined as this realization that we're all connected by something that is greater than us. On a greater meta level about community, I mean, obviously our species is hardwired for connection. Every single human project of worth has been predicated on our ability to cooperate flexibly at scale. So we look at bees, bees cooperate flexibly, bees cooperate at scale, but not necessarily flexibly, like the queen dies or whatever. The chimps, can cooperate with a certain amount of flexibility, but not at scale. But humans do have the ability to connect with each other and accomplish incredible things, but it requires cooperation, and it also requires sort of an intersubjective understanding of reality. And what has been so degraded over the past decade, but certainly over the past few years, has been this basic sense of epistemology. Like, we just don't agree on the truth anymore, and we're all served up little fragments of truth that are algorithmically curated for each one of us, that fuels our tribalism and extremism and social and political polarization, et cetera. And so I think it's really hard right now to find community and cooperation because we're so isolated, and we've been led down so many of these extreme paths. And, it's very hard to delineate between fact and fiction and, all of the prevalence of misinformation, et cetera. So, we have, I think, perhaps the greatest challenge before us is rediscovering our collective humanity and finding common ground. And I think that the only way to do that is having conversation, a really difficult, thorny conversation with each other, being in community with each other, because community almost always moderates, and it always dulls the edges. When you're just doing, private acts happening in public on Facebook or on Twitter, it's very easy to demean and dehumanize someone else. I mean, if you spend any time on those platforms, it's basically just ad hominem soup. But when we're face to face, it's hard to hate up close. And, I see this over and over again. When people actually come together in the same room, we might be, take any, inflammatory issue, like abortion in this country. It's like, there's pro-life people, and, they're like looking down their nose with moral indignation at the left to be like, how dare you not respect the life of the unborn? And then people on the left have the same moral indignation, and they're looking back at the people on the right and they're screaming, how dare you not, respect the right of a woman and the right to choose, what happens to her own body? And they're just screaming at each other. And it's so much easier just to scream at each other, because if we actually tempered our tempers, we'd actually realize that both sides are based in something deeply moral, it's almost morally unassailable, both sides. And it's only when people actually come face to face and have, some of these conversations and recognize each other's true common humanity, be like, oh, well, you're coming from a moral place, I'm coming from a moral place. Let's actually address solutions, to a common problem. And so, I see like this in like my friend, Dr. Mark Hyman. He's running clinical trials at the Cleveland Clinic, treating diabetics in two different groups. He's treating one as a group and one as individuals. And the recovery rate amongst the people that he's treating in a group is like 3 or 4x the people that are being treated as individuals.
When you said when you bring people together in a room, when you can actually understand the other person, that's when, like, and we live in a small town in Ireland, which is, we would have had lots of ideas about how the world should be. But when you're out there amongst such a differing views of opinion, it is a melting pot where it's almost like cooking a pot of soup. Like, the carrots can't just be carrots. They kind of blend with the onions and the tomatoes, and it forms this cacophony of soup. And you add a bit of salt and boom, you got a lovely recipe.
And it rounds your edges.
Yeah.
Which is what the edges. That's exactly right. That's exactly what it is. Right. Carrots become flavored with onions and vice versa. And, what we really want, and I think about this a lot visually, or before I say what we want, I'll say kind of how I am witnessing the state of the human condition right now. We seem to be in a world that's increasingly flat with spikes at the edges. So, we have in this country Republicans and Democrats, and it keeps getting more and more extreme, and every issue is defined in these binary oppositions and polar opposites, et cetera. But it's not just politics. I mean, we are growing wheat, soy, corn, and sorghum, and nothing else. We have tens of billions of humans, pigs, cows, and chickens, and no other species. We have 3 people in the United States that own more collective wealth than the bottom 50% combined. We are increasingly have this flat world with just a spike at the end, or spikes at the end. And again, if we talk kind of earlier in our conversation, we talk about the logos, the kind of foundational intelligence of nature. Nature is the opposite of that. Nature wants abundant biodiversity. Nature wants the bell curve. Nature doesn't want a flat earth with spikes at the end. Nature wants abundant biodiversity. It wants a huge middle class with a local jazz club and a local newspaper, and basically everything that you guys are doing in your town. It's like what nature wants is vegetable garden and all sorts of different crops. This is what we're looking for, is what I often see as a bush. It's a sort of two-dimensionally, it's portrayed as a bell curve, but we want something clumpy. We want something that looks like the brain or the vascular system or the gut, all of these expressions of nature, or a mycelium network, that goes underneath into our soil, that looks almost exactly like neurons in a brain. If you actually look at the image of it, we want these kind of clumpy, interconnected kinds of systems. We don't want this flat earth. And so I think, this is, when we talk about, well, what do we need to do to kind of reorganize culture and society? Well, what we also want is that soup of ideas. We want a multiplicity of ideas, because like when nature takes biodiversity and it clumps it together, it ends up selecting for the best ones. And so if we treat ideas like genes, and we can have real public discourse and a variety and multiplicity of interesting and different ideas coming from all sorts of places, then it follows that nature will also select the best ideas. But when we have this flat universe, we don't have very many ideas. We have just the ideas that exist at the very, very edge. And just by the laws of nature, those aren't going to yield the best ones. So when I think about a visual representation of what the world should look like, it should look like a tree or a bush, this three-dimensional bell curve of all these kind of intersecting networks. And I think that is a portrayal of health that we see in the human body and in nature, in natural systems and terrestrial systems everywhere. And we should do our best to live in accordance with nature.
Beautiful. I love that. That's a beautiful place, I think, to park this. That sense of the sense of celebrating diversity, the sense of hearing one another and allowing others and other voices to be celebrated, to be given room to and allow breathe and develop and grow and prosper.
But I know we're landing the ship now, but it's very difficult to see it in the current state of the world now, where there's so much power and so much resources with so few. And all the rest of us kind of in the middle, feeling like you're less and less relevant by the day and more of a drone within the machine. It's kind of hard to go, wow, how is this ship going to turn around? Like, where's this bell curve coming?
It's in essence the sense of local, taking back the sense of civil responsibility and the civil power, that the sense of it's the individual that celebrates the togetherness, not just leaving it up, oh, I'm part of this system. You are the system. We are the system. We all have the power to change it. And it's into our daily actions, the sense of celebrating diversity, taking responsibility, engaging in our towns, engaging our communities, rather than sitting back and giving out and whinging and saying, why aren't they doing this? Get involved and make change. We all have the power to create the world we want.